Hi, everybody. This is Kevin Tressolini from the News Journal and DelawareOnline.com, and I am here with my esteemed colleagues, Brad Myers and Martin Frank. Thank you very much for joining us on this late Thursday afternoon. We're going to have a little fun here this afternoon. Martin Frank has just completed an astonishing chore. He has put together a list of the top 100 Phillies of all time, 1 through 100 in order. So Martin, thanks for doing that. It was an impressive effort, a Herculean task, I would say. Maybe in this case, I would say a Mike Schmidt-ish task to give everybody a clue as to who the top player might have been. But if people want to take a look at that, it's on DelawareOnline.com. So please do. It's very impressive. I'll tell you what, when I looked at it, it certainly brought back a lot of memories. And, made me, I saw that picture of Willie Montanez standing at first base, and I thought I was back in 6th grade again. But anyway, Martin, just kind of give us a little bit of a, how-to guide on what your methods were, for putting that thing together. And, and I know you were able to kind of call on someone from Delaware who worked for the Phillies who was able to kind of give you a little bit of a hand there as well.
Yeah, it was multifaceted, actually. I went through the Phillies media guide. I looked at like all their players whose numbers were retired, all of their Hall of Fame, Wall of Fame guys, all the players who made all-star teams. And then I went to baseballreference.com, which was a great resource. And, they had like the all-time leaders in Phillies history in several different categories, up to the top 50 in each. So I just kind of pulled names from there. And then I kind of started putting in order. And, it was the hardest thing was kind of weighing what guys like did in the 1880s, 1890s with, even the early 1900s with, more of the modern day players, because back before 1920, it was considered the dead ball era. There weren't really many home runs. Like there's a guy on my list, Gavy Cravath, who I think is like number 30. And from like 1912 to 1920, he hit 119 home runs, which at the time was the most in baseball history. The next year, Babe Ruth passed him when he hit 60 in 1921, so, how do you account for that? Cravath led the National League in home runs for like 3 or 4 years, I think, like something like that. So it was kind of interesting in like trying to compare players from totally different eras. I mean, you look at Ryan Howard, who's in the top 10. I mean, he won the MVP in 2006, and he hit like 58 home runs. Back, if that was back in the 19 teens or 19 aughts or whatever, that's like 4 or 5 years worth for like the top home run guys. So yeah, it was just kind of interesting. Like, I learned a ton about Phillies history, the old players and even more the modern day guys. And it was actually a lot of fun putting it all together.
Well, Martin, I just want to say that the best thing about this is you put a tremendous amount of work into it. I think a lot of people, that's easy. Well, finding the top 100, choosing a top 100, I'm sure you probably started with way more than 100, whittled it down to 100, and then finding 100 photos, especially of players from the 1800s, 1920s. I mean, and I know Jared Whalen helped a lot too. So you guys just did a phenomenal job, and then writing a little biography on each player. It was so informative. And I just know, to me, the best part was like, I know about Scott Rowland. Bobby Abreu, players like that. But there were so many of these players from the older times that I've maybe never heard of. And I'm like, oh, wow, this guy's in the Hall of Fame, And one of the ones I thought number 98 on your list, Charlie Buffington.
I never heard of that guy.
He pitched 400 innings. He pitched 400 innings in 1888. I mean, we probably won't have two Philly starters combined pitch 400 innings this year. So
that's like two and a half. Yeah, that's like 2.5 years worth now. But back then, pitchers never came out of the game. I mean, and they would pitch like, I don't know, 2-3 times a week. It wasn't like a 5-man rotation, or you didn't have anything with like openers or anything like that. It was kind of crazy back then. I mean, but another cool thing that we did was we tried to involve the readers as much as possible, and having them pick their own top 10, based on, our top 20 and everything. And I thought that was pretty cool too, because, my top 2 were Mike Schmidt and Steve Carlton, and that's kind of how the fans had it. And the 10 players they had was the same as the 10 players I had in my list, but in different orders, different order other than the top 10. So it goes to show that Phillies history is kind of weird, because, they are the losingest franchise in Major League Baseball history. But so obviously they've had a lot of bad years. I mean, as obviously as you can tell from this 9-year run without having a winning season that they're currently on. But they also had some great seasons, and that's reflected in this top 100 list. I mean, a lot of the guys in the top 20, 30, even 40, were from their best teams in 2008, 1980, the other World Series teams in 1983, 1950, and 1915. So, Phillies history is not considered great with all the losses they have, but they've had some really great runs, and I think the top 100 here kind of reflects that. And that was pretty cool too.
True confessions here. I'm the one of the three of us who slept with his empty bottle of champagne the night the Phillies won the pennant in 1980. Of course, you guys weren't old enough to drink a bottle of champagne in 1980 like I was, but I'm the one who did that. And again, being a Phillies fan like I am, Martin, I got to tell you, when I was going through your list, it also made me think of the guys who should have been on the list if the Phillies hadn't traded them. Like Ferguson Jenkins and Ryan Sandberg and Julio Franco. You can tell. All Phillies fans are haunted by the things that should have been or could have been. And as I'm looking through the list, I'm thinking about the guys who maybe should have been there if they hadn't made those stupid trades. But one thing I did notice, and I was wondering this when I was going through the list. It made me wonder if there was a certain thing that was the most difficult. I wondered, it made me think of this when I saw that Gene Garber, who I thought was one of the greatest Phillies closers of all time, I thought he was kind of low on the list. Now again, times have kind of changed, and when he was pitching, the closer wasn't quite as defined as it is now, and since then. You've had some guys who've kind of been in that role, in a more defined area. But, was there a position that might have been, I don't know, maybe harder, to kind of rank guys?
I would say one of the hardest things I had was Dick Allen. And the reason I say that is because, I mean, he was a great player when he was with the Phillies, but he could have been so much better if he didn't have to deal with all the, the racism, the taunts, and the everyday things that he had to deal with. That was pretty much unlike just about every player in Phillies history. I mean, the guy came up in 1963. He was the rookie of the year. He had 40 home runs one year, and yet he was booed. He was, pretty much chased out of town. I mean, the Phillies ended up trading him, and then he came back again towards the end of his career. And if he was accepted, let's say someone like Jimmy Rollins or Ryan Howard, today, the guy probably would have spent his entire career with the Phillies, and he probably would have had several more seasons of 40 home runs. And who knows, he might have ended up better than Mike Schmidt. I mean, if he played his entire career in Philadelphia and, if he was able to do what potentially he could have done, so it was, Dick Allen is a great player and everything. He doesn't have the stats that would kind of his stats aren't better than Ryan Howard's, obviously, but I still put him in the top 10 because of, how good he should have been,
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of a hard thing. And you mentioned, obviously, Gene Garber, and there were other players like that who, I'm like, they were mostly known for what they did with other teams. Like,
Bryce
I
Harper.
think Steve Bedrosian's another guy. Yeah, exactly. And you even look at a guy like Grover Cleveland Alexander, who's one of the best pitchers of all time, but I think he spent only 7 or 8 years with the Phillies. His best years came after. It was kind of hard to put in perspective.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think you blended it together so well, and like I said, it's just so informative. If you're a big Phillies fan, you definitely don't want to miss this on DelawareOnline.com. Even if you're a casual Phillies fan, if you're a casual Phillies fan, you'll even learn even more because there's, like I said, there's a little bio with each player. And it's just so informative, and I know it's so hard to put them in order.
From all the rankings you've done, Brad.
Blend guys who were there for 2 years, had 2 really good years against guys that were there for 12 years, and then all the different eras. When you pitched 400 innings in a season, or 5 homers in a year was a big year. So, exactly. But I just think that. It was really, really well done, and anybody who has any interest in the Phillies at all will just really love going through this list.
Yeah, to me, that was one thing, Brad, you just mentioned an important point. Like when I was going through Martin's list, I was thinking the thing that would make it really difficult for me would be, take a guy like Johnny Callison, who was a really, really, really good player with the Phillies and made the All-Star team. He had a home run out of Shea Stadium to win the All-Star game in 1964. He had some great years with the Phillies, made the All-Star team a couple times, but, is he a superstar at the Bryce Harper level? No, no, but he was really good with the Phillies at a time when, except for 64, when they, weren't really that great a team. So you have to kind of weigh, how long they were with the team, maybe what they did in some other years with other teams and things like that. So to me, that would be the part that would be really difficult. In terms of closers, Papelbon was a great closer. My God, I think he had more saves than anybody with the Phillies, but the Phillies weren't very good. Right?
Exactly.
When he was their closer. So that's another tough aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's a good point about Johnny Callison. He would have won the MVP had the Phillies not choked those final 2 weeks of the 1964 season. And in which case, maybe, he's a World Series hero, and, he's probably higher up on the list than he was. I probably gave more weight to guys who played on their best teams. You'll see like Shane Victorino, I think, is in the top 30. Jason Worth is up there. Carlos Ruiz, Chooch, the catcher, he wasn't a great player. He probably wasn't their best catcher either, but just for what he meant to those teams. He was kind of like the guy who ran the pitching staff, so to speak. He kind of ran everything on the field, and he came through when he needed to. Victorino is another guy like that. He's probably most known for hitting the grand slam in LDS in 2008, and then the home run to beat to tie up the game against the Dodgers in the NLCS with Matt Stairs ended up winning a couple batters later with a 2-run home run. So, guys like that got a chance to perform in the postseason, and that obviously helped their chances. Moved them up on the list probably.
Another great thing about this list, I think we might have mentioned this earlier, is the pictures. I mean, the photographs are just great. The one I really liked was the one from the 1949 All-Star game at Yankee Stadium. The four catchers, the Dodgers, Troy Campanella, the Yankees, Yogi Berra, Bertie Tebbetts. I forget who Bertie Tebbetts played for, and the Phillies, Andy Semitic, all sitting there squatting in their catchers positions at Yankee Stadium. In an All-Star game picture from 1949. So the pictures, are another great priceless item from this package.
Yeah, like I said, great job getting together all of those photos, and you look at a couple of the photos, and you're like, oh, this photo's really not all that great. But then you think, well, it was 1886. We don't have a really big selection. Exactly. It's so hard to rank these guys. But we always like to criticize Martin a little bit. So I'll give you one that I thought that should have been higher. You had Gary Maddox at 56. And okay. I just thought, everybody has a favorite era of baseball. It's usually like when we're younger, when our teens, or, that's when you're kind of paying the most attention to the game. At least that's what we did back then. And I always thought Gary Maddox was great. Just so, one of the smoothest defensive players and a good hitter too. So I would have moved him up a little bit. But, when you do these rankings, it's just so hard. All of your top guys, I thought were pretty much spot on. Everybody in the top 20, they really deserve to be there. So when you go on down the list, I mean, where do you put these guys? An outfielder from 1924 versus a pitcher from 2006. It's really tough. But the important thing is just to get all of the right players in there ranked, and I certainly think that you did that.
Well, thanks. And truth be told, I had actually a Gary Maddox signed baseball glove when I was a kid. So I'm well aware of
56. That's just,
So, Martin, for a Mets fan, you're not such a bad guy after all. I'd say, well, listen,
were there guys like you would have in the top 10 that I didn't have? Like, would you guys have changed?
No, I thought I thought the top 10 was perfectly as it should be. Like like you said, I mean, I don't know, maybe I would have moved some guys around a little bit. I mean, nobody I can really think of now, but 1 and 2 were who 1 and 2 should be. No doubt about that.
Yeah, I think most everybody can agree on that. Mike Schmidt, I'll give you a little Mike Schmidt. I grew up in Arkansas, and my first Major League Baseball game, 1974, my dad drove my sister and I to St. Louis and for a weekend series with the Cardinals and the Phillies, and Mike Schmidt hit 4 home runs in a doubleheader. And I was upset because I was a Cardinals fan, but that's the first time I ever saw Mike Schmidt. And like everybody else, I saw at 9 years old. Wow, this guy's pretty good.
That's awesome. That's great, Brad.
That's
really cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, listen, everybody. I think that was a great discussion. Thank you for those who've tuned in. Please make sure you take a look at our list on DelawareOnline.com. It's really worth seeing, and I think it's great that we ended one of our last discussions talking about the Secretary of Defense, Gary Maddox, who was carried off the field in the shoulders of his teammates when the Phillies won the pennant in 1980. So I think that's also fitting that Gary Maddox was one of our final topics of discussion. So those who've tuned in, thank you. We do these once in a while on DelawareOnline.com when we have a particular story or photo gallery of some kind that is of interest. So keep an eye on DelawareOnline.com because we like to have these little discussions. It's a lot of fun. We enjoy them. So thanks to those who've tuned in. Thanks to our colleague, Andrew Sharp, for putting this together. He is the maestro. And thanks again to Martin for putting this together. And for Brad also joining us today. The three of us enjoy doing these things. We enjoy writing about these things and talking about these things. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it very much.